Alright, so everything you just saw was a whole bunch of testing that I've done in this Nike Pegasus Trail 4 with Gore-Tex. Today in particular, we are beginning week 2 of my New York City half marathon training block, and I just went for a 4-mile easy run. I'll throw the stats up on your screen now so you can take a look at today's actual run. But with all that run testing out of the way, let's get inside and let's talk about this Pegasus Trail 4 GTX, and I'll let you all know what I think about the shoe, how it performed for me so far, and what I think this shoe is going to be great for going forward.
All right, let's jump right in and talk about the Nike React Pegasus Trail 4 GTX. There's a couple things I want to say right away that are different from the Pegasus Trail 4. Notably, there's no Flywire, which does exist on this version of the shoe without the Gore-Tex upper. So the regular Nike Pegasus Trail 4 does have Flywire, and it also has a different heel counter or heel collar where there isn't this like booty type material that's very soft and flexible. It's just a normal like shoe collar around the heel, and I think that's just because it's not intended to keep as much grime and water and things outside of your shoe. This flexible material just creates a little bit more of a seal on the GTX or Gore-Tex version of the shoe. So there are some differences right off the bat from the normal Trail 4 and the Pegasus Trail 4 GTX that I think is important to note. The shoe comes in under 10 ounces or around 283 grams for a men's size 9. And it's about 9 ounces or 215 grams for a women's size 9. The stack for the shoe is 36 millimeters in the heel and 26 millimeters in the forefoot, giving you a 10 millimeter drop. Honestly, it doesn't feel that tall. We'll talk more about the feel later, but it is a decently high stack height shoe, especially for the trails. If you're talking about materials, we do have that Nike React midsole, a Gore-Tex upper that's really not too described anywhere else on Nike. Nike really doesn't even give you the weight or stack height either on their website. Running Warehouse doesn't have it, so you have to do some digging or way for yourself if you really want to know the weights and specs of the shoe. Not sure why it's like so secretive. Same thing with the rubber outsole. It's a nondescript or non-branded outsole, but it's a pretty well covered outsole. Some different patterns in the heel where it's more like straight line, deep rubber grooves, and then a little bit more like these triangles and like hexagon patterns or something like that up there towards the forefoot. The lugs themselves are pretty deep, but not really too aggressive. I'd say they're somewhere between like 3 and 4 millimeters on the bottom of the shoe. So a fairly average like road to trail shoe or light trail shoe, nothing too aggressive or too serious as far as the depth of the lugs on the bottom. You get what, in my opinion, is a really nice tongue. It has a lot of coverage, offers a lot of protection from elements. It is gusseted up to a certain point. I'd say right about here on the shoe. You can see when you look inside, there is that gusset again up to a certain point, and then it disconnects just by the top of your foot. So when you're talking about waterproofing and things like that, obviously that's going to be a point where it fails. Even if the Gore-Tex holds up, there starts to be gaps in the tongue and the upper where water could seep in if you're talking about real deep water crossings or anything really, really wet. But otherwise, the material again for the tongue and that overall gusseted tongue from, I'd say like the third lace hole down, it does keep the water out fairly well and remains really comfortable. Same thing with this heel, a decent amount of structure back here in the very back, no heel slipping, really no trouble with the fit overall for the most part. So it really just creates a nice, solid lockdown, good overall fit, very normal laces, and it just combines to be a very comfortable ride and upper overall. There is a fairly wide toe box. It's not wide like, say, an Ultra shoe, but it's wider than most Nikes. It does give you a little bit of room for your toes to spread out in the forefoot and really up towards the toes altogether. I did have an issue, and I think this is important for the fit, at least for the first couple times you put the shoe on. If you have a lot of volume in your foot, somewhere here where I'm holding it in the midsection of the shoe, like I actually do, I find my foot is rather tall. It was a little bit snug the first time I put it on, and it actually caused me to have to loosen it up just a bit, which made the shoe overall a little bit loose on the early trail runs or for anything too technical because my foot would be moving around. But this did resolve itself. I think it just needed that first run to stretch out the materials just a little bit. You know how they come laced from the factory, like I didn't delace everything and let it loosen up really. So when you first put it on, don't be too discouraged if it feels a little bit tight around like the core of your foot here. Just let the material stretch out, let it hug to your foot, and then overall since then it's been very pleasant and comfortable. I'm able to tie it tight again, and there really hasn't been an issue with my foot's volume in this area since that very first run. So give it a moment to stretch out, but just note if you do have a lot of volume, a very tall or thick foot in the middle, this might not be a shoe that works out well for you. So let's switch over more now to how it's felt, how I've used it, what I think it's going to be good for going forward, who should buy it, is the price worth it? This just provides a lot of cushion from the React. I'm not someone who runs super technical trails, so it gives you enough cushion in the React. It's stable enough on anything that I've run on, and you've seen kind of in the footage what kind of conditions and trails that I'm running on. It's protective enough on some of the rocks that I run on. I don't run anywhere particularly jagged. There is no rock plate or anything like that, but you do get some decent protection from the thicker React as well as the pretty thick covering of rubber on the bottom of the shoe. The grip is significantly improved from previous versions of any of the Nike trail shoes. I think they've finally nailed down some kind of formula where they're able to grip on wetter rock, wet wood, wet concrete, all of that. There's a lot more confidence when I'm running now. There were a couple times when I stopped on wet rock and really just tried to feel out the traction and see what the shoe could do, and it stands up pretty well. There are more exposed sections towards the heel of the shoe where that's just React, and if you get big jagged rocks or anything like that, obviously they're going to poke through that React outsole and midsole. So just be careful. Again, it's not made for the most technical of trails, but for anything where you're doing like single track trails, buffed out trails, even some climbing and climbing on rocks that are just large rocks where you can get full foot placement, this shoe is going to do really well, and it's been super comfortable in those conditions that I have here in New York, about an hour north of New York City. Now on the roads, it's also a very comfortable shoe, and I think ultimately that's why this has been always a really great road to trail shoe, or I kind of call it like a hybrid shoe. If you live in a town where you can run 1 or 2 miles out to the trails, go around for a loop on the trails, and then run home, this is going to be the shoe to do that. And I actually know a few people that love to run in the trail version of the Pegasus, even just on the roads all the time. If they're in wetter areas or colder areas, it just gives them a little bit more confidence, and ultimately the shoe is comfortable enough on the road to use on a daily basis. Just keep in mind that compared to a regular Pegasus or any other running shoe, there is obviously a lot of rubber, and even the lugs create a little bit more of a firm landing. Maybe that's what some people are looking for, but you'll start to feel it. It's not as soft as, another high stack height road shoe, just because you've got that thick rubber to really, pound on the ground if you're doing more than a few miles on the roads. So, again, snowy conditions, things like that I think people want to pick this shoe up for. It's going to be very comfortable. It's going to be very capable of doing anything in snowy or icy conditions for us who are maybe not always on the trails, but just need some good grip in the winter. But again, just keep in mind that it's not going to be as cushioned. And what I find in this area of New York is they really are able to plow the snow pretty quickly, and you're right back on pavement. So if you're running a lot of miles on pavement in the shoe, just keep in mind you'll start to feel those vibrations and beating through the thick rubber. The React really isn't that thick all the way up here by the toes, where it's going to give you much cushion, again, because of that harder outsole designed for trails. Now last, I just want to talk about the price. $160 retail for the shoe is pretty steep. But one of the main reasons I say it's steep is because Nike's always having sales. Honestly, this shoe already today is closer to $100 on Nike.com, and I really don't think this shoe has been out that long. If you look at like Runner's Warehouse, I looked this morning, it was still $160, but Nike's own website has it listed at like $111. Plus there's always discount codes like right on the front page of Nike. I think I picked up this shoe for like $80. So there's definitely ways to get it for way, way cheaper than the original $160 that's listed as the MSRP. So look for those sales. I think this shoe is well worth it, but just know that there are a lot of discounted prices out there. I think you wouldn't be getting a terrible deal if you bought it for $160, but again, why pay more when you can pay less? And it's definitely worth it if you can find it for a sale price closer to $120, even $100. So just to wrap things up, I'm going to go through some of my favorites and some of my dislikes of this shoe overall. I think this is a good road to trail shoe. One of my favorite light trail shoes that are out there today. It has a feel much more like a natural road running shoe, which I'm going to say is my first plus. If you're somebody who's looking to go from road to trails or actually get out on the trails for the first time, this shoe is going to feel like a very natural transition for you. It's going to provide the extra grip, the extra support, and a little bit of protection from something something like rocks, roots, and dirt, things like that. But it's also going to give you a much more natural road feel. It's very flexible, it's not too stiff, and there's just not a lot different on this shoe from a normal road running shoe. So it's a great way to get someone introduced to the trails, do something that's a little less technical, and just get people out there into the wilderness. My second plus, gotta mention it again, is that outsole. Big improvement by Nike overall. A lot more grip from this rubber, just better than anything they've ever had before in those wetter conditions. And I really think, again, for me, up where I'm doing 1,000 to 2,000 feet of climbing, rocks, leaves, gravel, mud, dirt, sand, a lot of confidence from this outsole. Nice job by Nike on the outsole improvements, and it just overall made the shoe feel much more usable on serious trails. Now, the one downside to this shoe that I'll mention is there's not a lot of protection for your feet. So again, as you move into those rockier conditions, more technical trails where there's steeper portions, jagged rocks sticking out, maybe some big roots that you can trip over, you know, there's no rock plate, which is not a must in a trail shoe. The rock plate itself is not a problem, but there's also not a lot of protection that moves up to the upper of the shoe. So a couple times, you know, I kicked something with my toe, and I can tell that this little piece of upper here is not going to protect you at all if you're kicking into rocks or tripping over rocks frequently, or just in a scenario where you could trip over a rock. Even the rubber here in the front that they add is really not very protective. It is very loose and like malleable up on the very front, so it's not going to provide a lot of protection for your toes. So all around on this upper, just not the greatest protection from rocks or anything like that. No rock plate in the shoe. It does make it feel much more natural and good for a hybrid road running shoe, again from road to trail, but it just ends up being a downside if you actually want to use it as a more serious trail shoe. So thanks for watching, everybody. There'll definitely be more New York City half marathon training coming up, so subscribe down below if you haven't already. Give me a like if you made it this far, and definitely feel free to put any questions in the comments if you have them about the Nike Pegasus Trail 4 with Gore-Tex. I'm happy to answer any of those questions down below. So thank you again, take care everybody, and have fun out there running.